Imagine accepting the highest office in a brand new country, a job that literally has no rule book. That's exactly what faced George Washington in 1789. The nation, having cast off the chains of monarchy, faced the monumental task of self-governance. Washington was acutely aware that every action he took would establish a pattern for his successors. As the living embodiment of the new republic, his leadership would determine whether the grand experiment in self-government would endure or collapse. "I walk on untrodden ground," Washington remarked, perfectly capturing the profound uncertainty facing the new United States. If you're ready to learn how the father of his country invented the presidency, hit that like button and subscribe. The Constitution is vague on the president's advisors, stating only that he may require the opinion of executive department heads. Washington transformed this into the practice of convening his department heads as a collective body of trusted counselors, establishing the presidential cabinet. He consciously rejected grandiose monarchical titles like Your Highness, preferring the simple Republican form of address, Mr. President. After 8 grueling years, exhausted and longing for retirement, Washington voluntarily stepped down from power. This act of relinquishing power established the standard of a 2-term limit, which became an unwritten rule for nearly 150 years. Through his proclamation of neutrality in 1793, Washington asserted the executive branch's primacy in foreign policy. He insisted on a policy of strict neutrality to avoid being drawn into a devastating European conflict, recognizing the military and economic fragility of the United States. The most urgent challenge was economic chaos, as the nation was burdened with federal and state debt totaling over $75 million from the Revolutionary War. Washington turned to Alexander Hamilton for a solution. The plan included federal assumption of state debts and the creation of a Bank of the United States. The National Bank ignited the first great constitutional debate. Jefferson argued for a strict construction of the Constitution, while Hamilton countered with a loose construction, citing the necessary and proper clause. Washington, persuaded by Hamilton's reasoning, signed the bill into law. The third part of the plan included an excise tax on domestically produced goods, including whiskey, which fell hardest on farmers in western Pennsylvania. For these farmers, distilling grain into whiskey was an economic necessity. By 1794, the protests escalated into the Whiskey Rebellion, a major test of the new government's authority. Washington acted decisively, contrasting sharply with the weak response to Shays' Rebellion under the Articles of Confederation. He personally led a militia of nearly 13,000 men toward the rebels. The show of force was overwhelming, and the rebellion collapsed without a single shot fired. Washington's action sent a powerful message. The federal government had the will to enforce its laws. While Jay's treaty with Britain was unpopular, Pinckney's treaty, 1795, with Spain was a diplomatic success. It granted Americans the right of free navigation on the Mississippi River and the right of deposit at the port of New Orleans. In his farewell address of 1796, Washington issued 2 solemn warnings. First, he cautioned against the baneful effects of the spirit of party, believing it would lead to domestic strife. Second, he advised the nation to steer clear of permanent alliances and to pursue a foreign policy based on American interests. During his term, the Supreme Court, under Chief Justice John Jay, refused to provide the executive branch with an advisory opinion, establishing that its power is strictly judicial. It only rules on specific legal cases. Washington was a complex man, a founder of liberty who was a lifelong slave owner. Though he owned over 300 enslaved people at the time of his death, he did provide for the freedom of his own slaves in his will. Far from being an austere figure, Washington was also a shrewd entrepreneur. He operated one of the largest whiskey distilleries in the country at Mount Vernon. Washington's journey from untrodden ground to retirement was a triumph of purposeful leadership. His conscious actions forged the essential structure and stability of the American government. The very political factions Washington warned against defined the next presidency. Our next video is part 2, John Adams, a tempestuous term. Question for the comments. Which of Washington's 4 major precedents, cabinet, term limit, title, or neutrality, do you think was most important for the survival of the early republic? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious.